MongoDB is one of the most popular and also one of the most fun and easiest to learn databases out there. So in today's video, I'm gonna give you a crash course on MongoDB and how you can get started with it. We start with a little introduction about MongoDB, and then I show you two ways how you can get started and connect with the database, either locally or in the cloud through Mongo Atlas. And then I show you how to access the database in your Python code, and then we go over the most important functions. So let's get started. And by the way, if you're new to the channel, I'm Patrick and I do weekly videos on Python and machine learning. And if you enjoy my content, then I would be very happy if you leave me a like and subscribe to the channel. MongoDB is a document-oriented database. This is also classified as a NoSQL or not only SQL database. So here we store our data in collections of documents. So let me show you how this looks like. So this very much looks like a JSON file. So if you're familiar with the JSON format, then MongoDB should be really easy for you to pick up. So in this example, we want to model the database for a to-do application. And each to-do item we store in a document. So the document in this example looks like this. We have an ID. This is a unique identifier for this item. Then we have a name and a text and a status. Then we have tags for this to-do and a date. And what is special here, for example, is that these tags here, this is a nested document. So here we have an array. And then again, inside this array, we have different dictionaries with a tag name and a category. So this makes it really flexible. So we can just put in this nested document inside the whole document. And we also don't have to think about this beforehand, like with relational databases. So there we have to think about how we structure our table and the different columns and even the data type. So we don't have to do this here. And this is still really fast and performant. So the data is actually not stored in the JSON format. So the format here is called BSON, which is binary JSON. And this is highly optimized and really fast. And what is really cool here is that we can also query for this nested types. For example, we can query for the tags with the tag name Python, and then we still get all the to-do items back with this nested item, and this is really fast. So we will see this later in action. And now in this example, so we model these to-do items and we use a slightly more simple version. So for the tags, we just use a nested list here with the different tags. So this is what we are going to model in a second. And now let me actually show you how we connect to a MongoDB database. So now let me show you how to connect to your database. And for this, I want to show you two different options, either locally or in the cloud. So let's start with the local version. And for this, you want to select software and then community server on the official homepage. And here you can download this. And I think for Windows, you actually have to do this. So select your platform and download this and install this. You could do the same for Mac, but there's another recommended way. And you find this in the official installation guide. So I can put the link in the description. There you find installation guides for Linux, Mac, and Windows. So for Mac, the recommended way is to use Homebrew. So you need Homebrew installed, and then you just need these two commands. So you say brew tab mongodb/brew, and then you say brew install mongodb/-community, and then you can specify the version. So I already did this, and now you can open your terminal, and now you can run this as a background service. So you could say brew services start mongodb-community and the version, and hit enter. And then in my case, it says it's already started. So you could do the same by saying brew services stop, and this would stop the service again. So let's start it again. And now it successfully started this in the background. And now we could type in Mongo, and this will give us the Mongo shell. And here we can interact with the database. So we could actually just work from here, but I also want to show you how to use a graphical user interface for this. So let's hit Control C and get out of this shell here. But we still have this running in the background. And now what you want to do is you want to install it's called Mongo Compass or just Compass. So you find this on the homepage under software and then Compass. And there you can install this for free and then install on your machine. So I already did this. So let's open up MongoDB Compass. And here we have our graphical user interface. So we have Mongo running as a background service. And now we can click on Connect. And then by default, we already have 3 databases, admin, config, and local. And we can create our own one. So you want to click on Create Database and then give it a name. Let's call this Test Database. And we also have to give it a collection name. So let's call our collection To-Dos and then click on Create. And then we already have this here. So this is our test database. And we can click on this and then we see the different collections. So here, for example, we can click on Create Collection and create a new one. And then if we click on a collection, then we see the actual data that we have inside this collection. So here we would see our different to-do items and we could import data here. But in this video, I want to show you how we add the data through our Python code. So now in order to connect in your Python code to this database, what you want to do is click on Connect and then disconnect again. And then here you see this connection string, so this one. So you want to copy this and paste this into your Python file. And I will do the same in a moment. But now I also want to show you how to use the cloud database. So we set up a cloud database and then again we get this connection string and then we can continue from there. So now let me show you how to get started with a cloud database. And for this, we use the Cloud Atlas product. And you can get started for free. So you will get a 512 megabyte storage for free. So this is really cool. So let's click on Cloud and Atlas. And then, of course, you need an account. So you can sign up. Or here I already have an account, so I can just sign in. And now here, after signing in, you want to create a new project. So let's give this a project name. Let's call this Mongo Tutorial and then click on Next. Then here we could add members and set permissions, but we can just click on Create Project. And now we have one project and now we want to build a cluster. So click on Build Cluster. And then here we see that we get a free shared cluster. So we want this. And now here you want to select a cloud provider and the region. So usually you want to select the region that is closest to you. So in my case, I use Frankfurt in Germany. And then we see with this free version, we get 512 megabytes storage. And yeah, we are good to go with this. So we can click on Create and we get this for free then. And now this will take a few moments to set up. So now our cluster was created and then we can click on Connect. And here we have to follow a few steps. So we have to add our current IP address. So let's just click on here and add this one. And then we have to create a database user. So for this, let's just use the user. Let's call this Patrick. And I also give this a password. So you can generate one. But in this example, I just use 1, 2, 3, 4. And then click on Create Database User. And now we click on Choose a Connection method. And here we use Connect Your Application because we use our Python code. And then so click on this. Then select your driver, so Python and the version. And this is not the Python version, but the version of the Mongo driver. So we use the latest one. And then again, we get a connection string. So this is similar to the first one that we get when we set up the local database. So we want to copy this and remember this. So let's copy this and close this. And now let's actually open a editor and open a new Python file. So here let's call this main.py, and then we want to create our cluster. So let's say cluster equals, and then this is a string, and now we paste in this connection string. So here we already see we get our user Patrick, and then we have to use the password. So in this case, this was 1234. So obviously I'm gonna delete this again after this video, so you can't mess around with this. And also obviously you don't want to use a easy password like this. And you also, in your production code, you don't put this in your Python file. So you want to store this credentials separately and then load them from a file that you don't deploy. So now we already have this string in our Python code. And now let's go back to this site. So before we connect this in Python, we click on collections, and then we also create a collection like we did with our local server version. So here we click on add my own data, and then we create a database. So let's give it a database name test and a collection name. So let's use to-dos like before, and then click on create. All right, so now we have our database and our collection, and here we can add the data. So now what we want to do is in our Python code, so we need a driver. And a driver is basically the one that talks to the database. So for Mongo, there are two official drivers that are recommended. So either PyMongo, which is the normal one, or if you want an async driver, then you want to use Motor. So in this case, we just use PyMongo. So we have to install this. So we say pip install and then PyMongo. And if you also use a cloud version, then you also have to install DNS Python, otherwise you will get an error. So go ahead and install this and hit enter. So in my case, this is already installed. So if you use a local database, then you don't need this DNS Python. And you could recognize this because then your connection string don't has this plus SRV here. But in my case, in our cloud database, we have this. So now we can also modify one more thing. So in our connection string, instead of just my first database, we can use the name test of the database that we just created. So now we have this, and now we need to import our Mongo client. So we say from PyMongo, we import the Mongo client, and then we set up a client. So we say client equals, and then our Mongo client with the connection string that we put inside this cluster variable. So now if we run this, then we should already be connected. So for example, now we can print client dot, and then we can say list database names. And now in this case, we can access a database by saying database, or let's say db equals client dot test. So you could also use this like a dictionary. So you can use it like so, client test, but it's a little bit easier to just say client.test like this. So now we are connected to this database. And now, for example, we can say print database, and here we can list the collection names like so. So let's run this and see if this works. So we get a authentication error, so I'm not sure why. I thought the password was 1234 and also the user. So let's go back to our cloud database, and let's go back to database access and edit our user Patrick. So let's click on edit. And by the way, here we could change this that we are not an admin, but just read and write database. This should be enough. And let's click on edit password. And let's actually click on auto generate and show this and copy this and update user. And now let's go back and paste this in here. So this is the place for our password. And now we have to wait until this is deployed. All right, so this was deployed. So let's run this again. And now it worked. So I'm not sure why the first password didn't work. So either I made a mistake or it didn't accept such an easy password. So, but now it works. So now here we see we get our list database name. So we have test, admin, and local, and we have the collection names. So here in our test database, we have the collection to-dos. So now we could set this up, and now let's actually add data into this. So now to add data into this, we want to create a example data. So in this example, we want to add a to-do item. So let's create this. And now here, this should be a dictionary. So we create a dictionary with the different attributes. So let me actually copy and paste this in here. So our dictionary should have a name, then the name of this user, Patrick, then it should get a text, my first to do. Then it should get a status. So the status is open or closed. Then we have tags. And now here, this is a nested document. So here we use a list. So it gets the tags Python and coding. And we also want to have a date. So we could actually just use this as a datetime object like this. And for this, we need to import datetime. So we say import datetime, and then we use datetime.datetime UTC now. Now let's put this in our database, and we want to put this in the to-dos collection. So we could access the to-dos collection by saying to-dos equals database. And then the same as here, we can access it by its name. So we can say db.todos, or we could do it like a dictionary access. So like we access a key, but let's do it like this. So now we have our to-dos collection. And now in order to put this to-do item inside our collection, we say result equals and then to-dos, and then in order to insert one element, we use dot insert underscore one, and then our to-dos, our to-do one. So now let's run this. And our code was successful. So let's open our database again and go to the collections. And then here we see in our to-dos collection, we have our one item with the name Patrick and the text first to do. So this worked. And here we have the tags. We see this is an array, so we can expand this. And then we get Python and coding. And we also see that we get this underscore ID. So this was generated for us. This is a unique identifier, and this is an object ID. So we could put this manually if we give it here the key underscore ID, and then we can, for example, say 1 and then 2 and 3. But then we have to take care of this ourselves. So we actually don't have to do this. So this will make sure that this is a unique ID. So inserting works. So let me show you how you can insert multiple items or multiple documents. So for this, let me copy and paste 2 more to-do items. So here, this is a list. And then here again, we have a dictionary, and here we define a second to-do and a third to-do from a different user. And now let's comment this out. And now in order to insert multiple ones, we say result equals to-dos dot insert, and now not insert one, but insert underscore many. And then we give it this list. I call this to-dos 2. So let's run this again. And again, our code worked. And now let's go back to the site and refresh the database. And now we see we get 3 items here. So all the 3 to-dos. So now let's see how we could retrieve items again. So let me comment this out again. So in order to retrieve items or query items, there are find methods. So we could say result equals and then to-dos, and then by the way, notice that we always use the collection to do this, not the database. So we say to-dos, and then we can say find underscore one. This will just give you the first match, so the first item. So we can print the result and see how this looks like. So let's run this. And here we see we just get the first item with my first to-do. So this worked. Now, in order to find particular ones, what you want to put in here is you want to put in a dictionary. So like this. And then, for example, we can query for the name Patrick. So let's just put in this key, and you might see that we have 2 to-dos with the Patrick name. So let's run this. And now here we get the same result. So for find one will return the first match. So this is still my first to-do. So for example, we can put in more information in here. So we could also use text and then my second to-do. So let's put this in here, a comma, and then this. So let's run this as well. And now you should see the result is the second to-do. All right, so this worked. And now let me show you what I mentioned in the beginning, that we could also very easily query for those nested documents. So here we have the tags and then this array. So we could also very easily query for the tag Python, and this will give us the corresponding document. So we could say find one, and then here we use, this is called, the key is tags, and then here we just use the key, let's use C++. So we only have one item with a C++ key. So this is this to-do item. So let's run this. And we see this was fast and this worked as well. So here we get this to-do from Mary. So now let me show you one more example of the find one. And this is if we know the particular ID, underscore ID, then we can also query for this. So a lot of times in real world applications, when you work with the front end and the back end, then you somehow retrieve the ID and you want to query your database. So let me copy this string and let's see what happens. So if I use underscore ID as key and then the object ID and run this, then we see we actually get none as a result, and this might surprise you. And the reason for this is that if you have a look at the database, then you see this is a object ID, and this is not the same as a string. So in order to actually use this, what we want to do here is we want to say from BSON or binary JSON dot, and by the way, this is installed by default with MongoDB, with PyMongo, I think. So you don't have to install this extra. So we can say from BSON dot object ID, we want to import the object ID. And then here we want to create an object ID with this string like so. So now let's run it again. And now this works. So now we get this to do from Mary. So yeah, keep this in mind that you want to use the object ID and not the string. There's a difference here. So now we've seen the find one example. Of course, we can also just use the find example. So we can say find, and let's remove this again. And then let's use the name Patrick and query for this one. So there should be 2 items. So here, let's remove this, and now this should work. So here we print the result. So let's see how this looks like. So here we see this is a PyMongo cursor object. So we could iterate over this. So we can say for result in results. So let's call this results in this example, and then say for, not from, for results in results. We want to print the result, and then we should see the actual items. So let's run this. So yeah, here we see we have 2 items, Patrick. And now what we could also do is, instead of printing this cursor object, we can convert this to a list and print it like this, and then run it again. And here now we see we have this list which has 2 items in it. So this worked as well. But now notice that we also still have this for loop here, and this doesn't print anything. And the reason for this is that once we consume this item, then the item is gone. So this is the same as with a generator. Once you have accessed the item, then it's no longer inside. So again, keep this in mind. So we could, for example, remove this, and then we could use 2 for loops. And then you might notice that we only see the results in 1 loop. So yeah, again, here only 2 items with Patrick, and then in the second loop, the results is empty. Now let's see how we can count documents. So for this, let's say print, and then we want to say to-dos, and then count underscore documents. And then if we run this, then this should be the total number. And now we see we get 1 type error. It's missing 1 required argument. So it needs at least 1 argument. And if we want to just count all documents, then we want to put in a empty dictionary in here. So like so, just 2 curly braces. And now let's run it again. And then we see we have 3 documents in total in here. And then again, we can query for different things. So we can query, for example, for text and then C++. And now if we run this, then we get 1 item. And let's use a typo, for example, here. Then we should get 0 items. So yeah, this is how we count documents. Let's see how we can do range queries and sorting. So notice that 2 times in our items, we just used UTC now. And for this last item, we defined a particular date at the January 1st, 2021 at 10:45 a.m. So let's see how we can query for a range. So for this, let's first create a date time. So let's call this just D, and this is datetime.datetime. And then let's use 2021, and the months, let's use February, and then the 1st. And now let's say results equals to-dos.find. And then again, here we put in our key that we want to look up. And here as a key, we want to say date, and then a colon, and then another curly braces and a string. And here let's use a $sign and then LT. This stands for less than. Then a colon again, and then our date time that we just defined here. So let's see how this looks like. So now if we print, and let's say, or let's use a loop again and say for result in results, we want to print the result. So now let's run this. And here we get only items with a date less than, so before this date, so before February. And this one is the only one in January, because right now, I don't know when you're watching this video, but we are in May 2021. So now it's only returning this. And for example, if we want all dates after this, then we can use GT, $GT. So this is greater than. So now let's run this. And then we see here we get two objects. And by the way, we can also immediately sort them by saying .sort. And then, for example, we can sort by the key we want. So in this case, let's just use name. So it doesn't make a difference because both are Patrick, but it would work. So yeah, you can apply sorting immediately and then sort by a key. And you can use these range queries. And for this, let's go to the official homepage. So again, here you find different operators. And here you can click on query and protection operators. And then here you find the syntax for the different ones. So here we used GT for greater than. We can also have greater than or equal and less than. And then we have some more. So again, I can put the link for this in the description and then you can check them out for yourself. All right, so now let's see how we can delete items. So for this, let's remove this again. And then here we say result equals, and then we use to-dos dot remove underscore one. So you see the API is very simple. We have find, insert, remove, and then we have underscore one or underscore many. And here again, we can use a dictionary and then put in the different keys and values we want. So for example, here, let's use this special object ID again. So then again, we need to import this. So we say from bson.objectID import object ID. And then here as a key, we use underscore ID. And then here we want to create a object ID with a string. And here we want to use this one. So copy and paste. So this is the second to do. So let's run this. And here I have a syntax error. So this must be wrapped in a dictionary, of course, like so. So let's run it again. And again, we get an error. And yeah, here I made a mistake. So deleting is not called remove one, but delete one. So now it should work. So yeah, now we don't have an error. So let's go back to our cloud database and refresh the site. And then we see our second to do is gone. So yeah, this worked. Of course, we can also say remove, delete many. And then, for example, let's just use the name and then as name Patrick. So there's just one left with the name Patrick, but this would work. And then remove all those to-dos. And here again, I made a typo. And so notice that you don't get a syntax error or something. So you get a type error. But of course, we want to call this delete many. So let's run this again. And now our code was successful. So again, let's refresh our site. And we see we only have one left now. So this worked as well. And yeah, so if you want to delete all at once, then just put in a empty dictionary. So this is a very powerful operation to delete all. But now I don't want to do this. Now I want to show you one more thing, and this is how we update the items. So for this, we have the update one and update many functions. So let's see how we can do this. So for this, again, we say result equals to-dos dot update underscore one. And then again, we define a dictionary. So we only have this one left. So let's query for tags, and then this should be C++. And now after this, we have to define with what we have to update this. So here we can define a comma, and then we put in another dictionary. And then as a first string, we have to put in the operator. So in order to set a different value, we want to say $set and then a colon and then another dictionary. So be very careful here. And now we want to define the new value and also the key for this value. So in this example, let's say we want to set this status to closed or done. So then let's copy and paste this here. So here we set status and then let's say done. And now let's run this. All right, so the code was successful. And then again, let's refresh the page. So now it's still open and I click on refresh. And now we see the status is done. So this might be very small for you. Let's make this larger. And then we see this worked. So this is how we update items. And again, for this syntax here, I can point you to the official site. So for the operators, you also have this site with the update operators. And here you see we use this set. So this sets the value of a field in a document. But for example, you have also these different update operators with min, max, and mul, and so on. And also this maybe might be also important. So unset, this removes the specified field from a document. So in order to unset this, we use $unset and then let's say status, and then we have to give it a value. In this example, just use none and run this and the code worked. So let's go back to our cluster and refresh the page. And now you see the tag status is gone. So now we remove this key value pair. And now in order to set this again, we could set status and then let's give it a new status, new open, so just for example. And now if you use the set function or the set operator on a value that is currently not there, then it will add this to this document. So now if we refresh this, then again, we should have this status key here. And here you can see, for example, that the MongoDB is very flexible. So you can remove, so here we see the status new open. So we can remove and add new values or key value pairs and work with them. So we don't have to know them in advance before we define our database. We can just change them when our data changes. And yeah, this makes it really cool and really easy to work with. And yeah, these are the most important functions that I wanted to show you. And hopefully you can see that the API is really easy and fun to work with. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And again, if so, then please leave me a like and consider subscribing to the channel. And then I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.